Tim. We can talk about that and much more. We're really honored to have former Senator Scott Brown of Massachusetts. He is currently the chair of the Competitiveness Coalition. He also was an ambassador in the Trump administration. Senator Brown, welcome to the Tim Jones and Chris Arps Show.
Hey, it's good to hear your voices, and it's good to be back on the air in that part of the area. The last time I was in St. Louis University barred me from speaking. How cool is that?
You know what? I vaguely remember that. I forgot about that.
I'm so hardcore. They just don't want me on campus.
Forgot all about that. Hey, before we get into many of the questions that we have for you, I have to ask you about this FTC ruling that came out yesterday that made non-compete clauses, I guess, basically illegal. What does that do for the competitiveness of American business?
Well, obviously, it creates a problem. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, the FTC under Lina Khan is just a runaway freight train, basically trying to undermine our tech industries, make us less competitive. In this instance, is a perfect situation. When somebody executes a non-compete, there has to be consideration. You just can't do it for $1. Well, for $1, if I hire you and I give you $1, you can't work for somebody else. That's not how it is. Usually, in order for them to be valid under any circumstance, you need to have, consideration. And it's usually of a substantial amount. And what it does is basically allows, employees to basically freeform, take potentially privileged, confidential work product information and bring it to other companies. And it's not a good precedent to set. I think there's laws in effect not only in your state but other states that address this very, very real issue. It's a small potatoes when you're talking about that woman you had on who has a restaurant and can't afford. We have so many stories like that around the country and here in New Hampshire. The cost of goods under Biden, it's just out of control. Everything's upside down.
Senator, great to speak with you. Tim Jones here. Not that you and I have gotten any older, but but many years ago, probably 10 years ago or so, when I was in the Missouri legislature, I remember following your candidacy, and you were known as kind of the everyman candidate. You drove your pickup truck all over the state of Massachusetts successfully in your run for office there, and so I just really admired you for all the hard work you've put in trying to serve the country, and now continuing to serve it by bringing these important issues to the fore. You mentioned the FTC. Wow. With all the horrors, with all the parade of horribles that the Biden administration has committed, this agency has been one of the worst, hasn't it? And the problems with these agencies is a lot of what they do is flies under the radar. The media, of course, the corporate media does not report on it. But one of the biggest things Lina Khan's trying to do is kind of undo the understanding that we've had forever of what antitrust policy should be, especially from a conservative viewpoint. Could you touch a little bit on that and kind of the dramatic systemic changes that she's trying to make that would be bad for our nation?
Yeah, listen, it used to be a bipartisan, non-confrontational board, just figuring out issues, making sure that we're, being competitive around the world and that we have a competitive advantage over China and other, countries that basically want to eat our lunch. And, any company that's too big, they basically want to break it up. For example, Amazon, obviously Apple, all these other companies, they want to break them up, and they want to change the standard in which they evaluate it. It's not so much now, is it a good price? Is the consumer getting a good price? Is it fair and competitive? It's just, if you're too big, we're going to break you up. And what that does is it gives a green light to China, the Chinese Communist Party, especially when it comes to our high-tech industry. For example, you want Google Maps to pick up the babysitter? You won't have it. You want to have your photo apps downloaded so your grandmother can see it? This is not happening. So they're allowing for a potential backdoor, not only for bad actors, but for other countries to basically get into our tech industry, which is the number one employer, number one innovator in the world, and they want that position. And that's what she's doing. She's working with the EU, working behind and going behind people's backs, not answering subpoenas, not going to Congress and telling the truth. And she's hopefully her days are very, very numbered. And here's what people need to remember. You see Biden bumbling and fumbling and falling and doesn't know where he is and where he's going, but behind the scenes, you have people like her and these ideologues who are basically, running rampant and putting more and more and more regulations and making our lives more and more and more difficult. And they're not stopping until, hopefully we get them out of office.
Speaking with Scott Brown, former U.S. Senator from Massachusetts and chair of the Competitiveness Coalition. Senator, the Labor Department announced that it's hiking the threshold for workers to receive overtime pay. They're saying that this should give about 4 million more people higher salaries. You wrote an op-ed with the title that life under Biden more costly for everyone but those on top. This new Labor Department ruling is going to help those people, right?
Well, listen, I'm all in favor of people getting a fair wage and a competitive wage, but when you have the federal government trying to set the standards, since when has the federal government been doing anything right? The post office is billions of dollars in debt. The Veterans Administration, there are some angels that at work there, but let's be real. The coverage that are happening, they're not good. You have Obamacare, is all screwed up, and now they want to get involved in telling people what they can and can't pay. And I'll tell you what, if you're a good worker, you're going to get paid. If you're not doing a job, you're not going to get paid. And that's my philosophy. And I just think the government should just stay out of, the private sector and let people, do their jobs and do it really well.
Senator, the other effect that some of these agencies like the FTC and others are that maybe people aren't connecting the dots here, but with Lena Khan and these other unelected bureaucrats basically deciding just to kind of bend the law to their own devices, that's having a lot of real world consequences, right? It's one thing to say, we're going to go after big bad corporate America and break them all up. Well, that causes prices to increase. Then when you have Bidenflation on top of it, I mean, everything the Biden administration is doing, whether it's the reality or not, it sure appears like these are attacks on the middle class. The middle class suffers from all this, whereas the media couches it like they're taking on big bad corporate America, but the effect is the middle class is the ones who are suffering, right?
Listen, people aren't stupid. I mean, really, the people in our country are not stupid. The working people are out there every single day. They walk into the grocery stores. I do all the shopping. I love to shop, and in and out like a freight train. But I know what eggs were when I got back from New Zealand. They were $1.80. Gas at BJ's with my BJ's card was, $1.82. And now I just paid today almost $4. Eggs were almost $4. It's not right. You go in for a pot roast and it's out of sight. So people aren't stupid. And yes, like to take the EPA, all the rules and regulations that they're putting, they've been slapped down in the Supreme Court. You have a lot of these unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats, as you said, that are making our lives more and more and more difficult. You speak to any mom and pop business and the amount that they're paying for electricity, for insurance, for wages, for the cost of goods, their margin is shrinking. There's fast food places, McDonald's, Wendy's, whatever. The answer for your senators, because I know them, is to say, just tax those corporations more. Well, we're at a 3% margin, and now they're basically down to a 1% margin, of making money and hiring people. That's why you see the automation. That's why you see a lot of the changes that you have, or that's why you see people just saying, I'm done. And then have the expiring tax code that tax benefits that President Trump put in. Biden's just going to let them go away. So you have these, let's say, a farm or a business that's been in for generations, like the jewelry company you were referencing. They want to sell it or give it to their kids. It's a problem. They're going to have a real tax problem. So people, it's the small things that people don't realize. They just see the headlines in the news. But, we are in trouble financially. When I was there, $9 trillion national debt. It's $34 trillion. Are you kidding me? And what's happening on our college campuses right now, it's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. And I'll tell you what, we need to get involved. Your listeners, my friends and family, we need to get involved, whether it's at the school committees, city council, I don't care if you're at the cemetery commission, you got to get involved, and start to push back.
Speaking with Scott Brown, former U.S. Senator and chair of the Competitiveness Coalition. Senator, tell us about the Competitiveness Coalition. I will not try to say that again.
Yeah, I know. Try it 3 times fast. Forget about it. Listen, it's a group of individuals and businesses who care that Congress is putting more and more, and unelected bureaucrats, more and more regulations and roadblocks on our innovators. Even if it's a new innovator, the hoops they have to go through to compete on a global basis are out of control. And then you have Biden wants to raise the corporate tax rate again. That makes us less competitive when you have, Ireland and China and other countries more competitive in that regard. And I'll tell you what, I'm not. I work hard. I work hard just like you do. 3 or 4 jobs my whole life, and the value of our dollars, it's shrinking. And this administration had, just because they didn't like Trump, reversed every single executive order, including at the border, which, as you know, is dramatically affecting budgets in every state. Every state is a border state, and it's just not right. And it's not necessary. Just do your job, Mr. Biden. Jeez.
Folks, speaking to Senator Scott Brown. Senator, what do you think the message should be? I think we've touched on a lot of the messages, but if you had to boil it all down, what do Republicans, those on the center right side of the aisle, what case needs to be made as we head towards what's going to be a bruising electoral cycle? It seems like the Democrats are doing everything they can to lose many of their traditional voting blocks. So a lot of opportunity out there for the Republican Party, right? If they message it and promise to deliver on results, right?
Well, here's what people are doing. They're looking back almost 4 years ago and seeing what under President Trump, like the woman that spoke, the restaurant owner, things were better. The border was secure. Inflation was non-existent. Fentanyl was not flowing as crazily as it was. Yes, we had the pandemic, created by China, and we were getting out of that. And President Trump, did what he could do, something that will hopefully never happen in our lifetimes. But then you have our military strong. We were feared by our foes and trusted by our allies. And it's not happening now. So, yes, people are going to reflect back as to how it was. Then they're going to see what it's like under Biden. And, yes, they'll have Dobbs and they'll have a lot of the decisions in that regard. But then does that trump the chaos at the border? Does that trump the lack of support, the fact that people don't have $1,000 in their savings account in the case of an emergency? Does that trump people dying on the streets through gun violence and through fentanyl? And they're going to have to make a decision. And we have to do just what the Democrats do. You got to get out there and do the harvesting. Whatever's legal, you do it, because they're going to do it, and they'll probably do it a little bit better. So we got to get out and vote and get active and push back, because this is it, folks. And I'm not making this up.
Senator, before we wrap up here, I've got to ask you the big question that has always been on my mind. How in the world did a Republican win a Senate seat, the lion of the Senate seat, Ted Kennedy, back in 2010 there in Massachusetts? How did that happen?
Well, listen, I was down 41 points. I ended up winning by 7 in 6 months. And it was, for, as you said, that hard work and just being, honest with people. They wanted a change. They wanted somebody different, and they wanted somebody who's going to be honest. And I lost, 3 years later because, President Obama and the mayor of Boston, they didn't like what I was doing. I was doing my job, and I was threatening them. They didn't want me to run for president. They didn't want me to threaten Obama. So they spent, hundreds of millions of dollars. But I'll tell you what, I'm getting antsy again, because I can't stand what's going on. And, I'm young enough, and I'm even though I have a rock band and we just opened up Skid Row 3 months ago, we're making a ton of money. I may just have to shift gears here, folks. You know what I mean?
All right. You making some news here on the Tim Jones and Chris Arps show there, Senator?
Well, you know what? It's no secret. I think anybody who cares about this country better reevaluate and get involved, because you can't have the people running this country who are doing it. You see what's happening in our campuses. You see what's happening in some of our courts. You see what's happening on our streets. And if we don't get involved, then, what's the point? Really.
And let's put a plug in there for the band here. The name is
Scott Brown and the Diplomats. You can go to scottbrown-diplomats.com. We're performing all over New England. We may be at the convention this year, but just working that through. And opened up for Skid Row, which was very, very cool. Sold out show. And
so, are you a metal band there? What
all classic rock. We go from Dion up to Blink 182, Green Day, Led Zeppelin, Kiss. Cool. Cheap Trick. Mm-hmm. I personally have played with Cheap Trick 8 times. Warren, Firehouse, Buck Dahmer with Blue Oyster Cult, Vanilla Fudge. So, I love to play. I've been playing for about 9 years now.
All right. Well, fantastic. Well, that is
very cool.
Former Senator Scott Brown from Massachusetts, chair of the Competitiveness Coalition, and he has his own rock band that's called Scott Brown and the Diplomats. Look them up on the internet. You can Catch him on Twitter at Senator Scott Brown and the competitivenesscoalition.com. Senator, it's been a real pleasure, and I hope we can have you back on the show again.
Hey, anytime. I'd be honored. It was great talking with you both. God bless you, and God bless all your listeners.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Boy, what a well-rounded...